My beloved brother and sisters, sometimes life feels like a storm we never asked to sail through. The waves of pain, confusion, and loneliness hit harder than we ever imagined. We try to hold on, we try to stay strong, but deep inside, something begins to break. And then, somewhere in that silence, Allah sends you a message, not through a person, not through a miracle in the sky, but through His words. A surah that feels like it was written just for you. A surah that speaks to the wounds no one sees. It's as if Allah Himself is saying, I see you, I know what you're carrying, and I have not forgotten you. The Quran doesn't just speak to your mind, it speaks to your heart, to your wounds, to your moments of silence when no one hears you. And among its chapters, there are some that come to you like light after darkness, surahs that don't just teach, but transform. This surah is one of them. It isn't just verses and recitation, it is medicine. It meets you in your despair, when your heart is heavy and your eyes are tired, and it reminds you that you were never forgotten. It speaks into the emptiness that you've tried to fill with everything. But Allah, this surah takes your fears, the ones you hide beneath your smile, and gently holds them in the light of divine mercy. It tells you that even in your waiting, you are being written into a greater story. You read its verses, and suddenly the chaos of your life begins to quiet, because this surah reminds you who you belong to. It's not a coincidence that you open to this page. It's not random that your heart felt drawn to it. There is something sacred in how Allah brings you to His words, especially when you feel furthest away, because this surah, it whispers the truth you've forgotten, that no loss goes unseen, no tear is wasted, no struggle is meaningless. Every heartbreak was a redirection, every silence was an invitation. You begin to see that Allah was never punishing you, He was preparing you. This surah makes you confront your fears not with anxiety, but with faith. It teaches you that surrender is not weakness, it's strength dressed in humility. It's when you finally stop running from what hurts and run toward the one who heals. The more you recite it, the more you realize that the Quran was never just meant to be memorized. It was meant to be felt. You feel your chest soften, your bitterness dissolve, your anger quiet, because these verses carry the weight of divine compassion. They don't shame you for your struggles. They lift you out of them. They remind you that Allah doesn't expect perfection. He wants connection. He doesn't look for flawlessness. He looks for sincerity. This surah shows you that even when the world overlooks you, Allah sees every small act of faith, every silent prayer, every tear shed in the night. It teaches you to be patient, not because waiting is easy, but because you trust the one you're waiting for. It shows you that gratitude isn't about having everything you want, but seeing the beauty in what you already have. It replaces fear with hope and despair with purpose. It breaks the chains of your doubts one verse at a time until you start to breathe differently, until the same pain that once crushed you now brings you closer to the one who created you. And slowly you realize that this surah wasn't just teaching you about life, it was teaching you how to live it. It awakens your heart to the reality that faith is not about being unshaken, it's about returning even after you fall. Because there will be days when your heart feels heavy, when your prayers feel empty, when you doubt your own worth and wonder if Allah still listens to a voice like yours. There will be moments when you fall short, when you slip back into habits you thought you had left behind, when you look at yourself and feel disappointed. But this surah reminds you that faith isn't measured by how perfect you are. It's measured by how sincerely you keep coming back. It teaches you that the distance you feel from Allah isn't a sign that you're lost, it's a sign that your heart is still searching. And every time you return, every time you whisper His name, even through guilt or confusion, you are proving that your faith is alive, because faith is not a straight line. It's a journey of rising and falling, of breaking and rebuilding, of forgetting and remembering again. This surah speaks to the heart that is tired of trying and tells it that Allah never tires of forgiving. It speaks to the one who thinks they've fallen too far and tells them that Allah's mercy reaches even deeper than their mistakes. It reminds you that you are not defined by your lowest moments, but by your willingness to rise after them, that your setbacks do not erase your sincerity and your sins do not cancel your hope. Every verse pulls you closer to this truth, that no matter how far you wander, the path back to Allah is always open, that even if you feel unworthy of His love, He still calls you by your name. This surah teaches you to be gentle with yourself, to understand that your faith was never meant to be flawless, but faithful. It whispers to you that Allah loves the brokenhearted who still bow, the weary who still pray, the ones who cry but still believe. Because that's what real strength looks like in the eyes of God. Not perfection, but persistence. The courage to rise when you could have given up. The strength to seek forgiveness when shame tells you to hide. This surah teaches you that falling is not failure. It's part of returning. It's how your soul learns humility, how your heart learns sincerity, how your faith learns depth. And in that process, something beautiful happens. You start to see Allah not as a distant judge, but as a loving companion through your journey. You start to realize that even your mistakes had purpose, that even your detours were leading you closer to Him, because it was in your lowest moment that you felt the sweetness of His mercy. It was in your darkness that you discovered His light. This surah doesn't promise that faith will always feel easy. It promises that Allah will always be near. And sometimes that nearness is enough to bring you peace, even when everything else feels uncertain. It shows you that your return is never too late, that you don't have to have it all figured out before you come back. You just have to come with your wounds, your doubts, your imperfections. Because Allah doesn't expect you to be unbroken, He expects you to be honest. This surah strips away the illusion that strength means never struggling. It shows you that strength is in the quiet moments when you choose to keep praying despite the pain. When you choose to hope despite the fear, when you choose to trust even when your heart trembles. It reminds you that every fall you've experienced, every tear you've shed, every battle you fought within yourself was not in vain. They were all part of your becoming, part of the story Allah is writing for you. And when you finally look back, you'll realize that it was never about being unshaken. It was always about how beautifully you kept returning. It shows you that divine timing is never late. It is perfectly written for your soul's growth, because we live in a world that teaches us to rush everything. Success, love, healing, recognition. We are told that delay means denial, that waiting means you're being left behind. But this surah teaches something deeper, that Allah's timing is not like ours. His clock doesn't run on minutes or months. It runs on mercy, on wisdom, on what your soul truly needs to become who you were meant to be. There are moments when you pray and nothing seems to change, when doors you've been knocking on for years stay closed, and you start to question why. You begin to wonder if maybe your prayers weren't good enough, if maybe you weren't worthy enough. But this surah whispers softly that the delay is not a punishment, it's a preparation. Because Allah doesn't withhold to hurt you, He withholds to protect you, to strengthen you, to ready you for the blessing that is coming. What you think is silence is often divine speech, not in words, but in waiting. Sometimes the not yet is more merciful than the yes. Sometimes the delay is the space where your heart learns to depend not on the outcome, but on the one who controls it. This surah teaches you to see waiting not as emptiness, but as sacred training. A spiritual classroom where your faith is refined and your trust is tested. Every moment you spend wondering when is an invitation to remember who. You start to realize that every unanswered prayer was not ignored but postponed until your heart was ready to hold it with gratitude instead of arrogance. There are things you asked for that would have broken you if they came too soon. Things you begged for that would have distracted you from what truly matters. And Allah, in His mercy, held them back. Not because He didn't hear you, but because He loved you too much to give you something that wasn't good for you yet. This surah teaches you patience, not as passive waiting, but as active faith. It teaches you to trust the unseen, to find peace in the pauses, to believe that behind every delay there is design. The more you reflect on its verses, the more you start to see your life differently. You begin to see that the rejection you cried over was actually redirection, that the delay that broke you was actually saving you. You start to notice how perfectly everything aligns when you stop forcing and start trusting. You remember the times you thought something was lost, only to realize later that it came back to you in a better form. That is divine timing. Never late, always precise, always personal. This surah reminds you that Allah doesn't forget your prayers. He stores them, layers them with wisdom, wraps them in timing, and sends them back when they will lift you, not destroy you. And in that waiting, something beautiful happens inside you. You grow softer, stronger, more surrendered. You stop asking, why me? And start saying, show me. You begin to see that the wait was not wasted, it was worship, that every tear you shed was watering the seeds of patience, that every moment of uncertainty was building the roots of trust. And when the time finally comes, when Allah unfolds what He had written for you, you realize it was worth every second of waiting. Because what comes from Him comes perfect, not rushed, not incomplete, not too soon. This surah makes you fall in love with divine timing. It teaches you that Allah is never late. You were just early in your expectation. It shows you that He doesn't delay to deprive you, He delays to develop you. And that realization changes everything, because you stop chasing what isn't meant to be and start trusting what is already written. You start to walk slower, breathe deeper, and trust more fully. You learn to surrender to the rhythm of His wisdom, to rest in the pace of His mercy. And when your heart begins to ache again, when you feel that old impatience rising, this surah reminds you once more, the delay is not the end of your story. It is the shaping of your soul. It reminds you that Allah's mercy reaches you in ways you can't always see, but always feel. Mercy is not always loud. It does not always arrive wrapped in gold, announced by the applause of the world. Sometimes mercy comes quietly, in the spaces you least expect it, in the subtle shifts of your heart, in moments when you are so lost that only Allah's gentle hand could guide you. This surah opens your eyes to that unseen mercy, the kind that walks with you when no one else notices, the kind that reaches your soul even when your mind is clouded with doubt or despair. It teaches you that even when you feel abandoned, even when life feels heavy and unfair, Allah's mercy is there, silent, patient, perfect. You begin to see that every comfort you've ever experienced, every relief from pain, every smile after tears, every unexpected door opening, those were not coincidences. They were His mercy in action. And sometimes the mercy is not what you think you need. Sometimes it is a lesson in disguise, a challenge that is itself a gift, a struggle that strengthens you in ways comfort never could. This surah makes you aware of how mercy can feel like a challenge, a barrier, a hardship, and yet all the while it is drawing you closer to Allah, protecting you from what would have harmed you, shaping you into a stronger, wiser, more sincere believer. It reminds you that mercy is more than forgiveness. It is sustenance for your soul. It is patience in your suffering. It is guidance when you are blind with confusion. It is relief when your chest is tight with worry. It is the soft whisper in your heart that tells you, I am with you. I have not left you. You are not alone. The surah teaches you to recognize mercy even when it comes through pain, to trust that every closed door, every delay, every hardship is layered with His compassion. Because Allah's mercy does not always feel like what you expected. It may feel like restraint when you wanted freedom, like delay when you wanted answer, like solitude when you wanted company. And yet, through this surah, your heart begins to understand all of this is mercy. It is mercy that protects your future from your impatience, your ignorance, your own desires. It is mercy that allows you to grow, to learn, to mature, to prepare, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, you start to feel the warmth of that mercy in your heart. You notice it in moments of gratitude, in moments of relief, in moments of awe. You start to sense that even in your failures, mercy was present, keeping you safe, keeping you humble, keeping you hopeful. This surah transforms your relationship with mercy. You begin to see it not as something you earn, not as something conditional on your actions, but as a gift freely given, flowing to you whether you feel deserving or not. You start to feel it in your prayers, in your reflection, in your patience, in your tears. You realize that mercy was never meant to be a concept you understand fully. It is meant to be experienced, lived, felt in the deepest chambers of your heart. And when you begin to live in that awareness, you start to notice its presence everywhere. in the beauty of creation, in the love of family, in the kindness of strangers, in the lessons of hardship. This surah teaches that mercy is the thread that weaves through your life, connecting your moments of despair to moments of joy, your doubts to your faith, your struggles to your triumphs. You understand that Allah's mercy is not limited by time, by space, by circumstance. It is eternal, ever-flowing, unbound by human measure. And that realization changes how you live. You start to trust more deeply, to forgive more easily, to hope more confidently, to love more fully. You begin to see life not as a series of random events, but as a tapestry of divine mercy, perfectly placed, perfectly timed, perfectly meant for your growth, your guidance, your salvation. And in that understanding, your heart softens, your spirit lifts, and you feel an intimate closeness to Allah that you never thought possible. It calls you to trust, even when everything around you feels uncertain and dark. Trust is not always easy. It is not a quiet, comfortable feeling that arrives without struggle. Trust comes when your heart is trembling, when your mind races with doubts, when the weight of life seems unbearable, and yet you make a choice to believe that Allah is closer than your breath, that His plan is wiser than your understanding, that His knowledge surpasses every fear you carry. This surah reminds you that trust is not blind, it is courageous. It is the courage to let go of what you think you control and surrender to what you know only Allah can. It teaches you that even when the path seems unclear, even when every direction appears uncertain, even when every step feels heavy, there is guidance if you place your heart in His hands. You begin to realize that uncertainty is not chaos. It is the space where faith grows, the soil where trust takes root. Every time your plans fall apart, every time your expectations fail, every time your life seems to crumble, this surah whispers to your heart that Allah is shaping something beyond your vision, something more beautiful than your imagination. Trust does not always mean understanding. Often it means patience, silence, and holding on to the rope of faith when your grip feels weak. This surah shows you that darkness is not the absence of light, but the presence of Allah's hidden wisdom. It teaches you that what feels like delay, loss, or rejection is often protection, redirection, and provision you cannot yet see. It transforms the way you perceive fear and doubt. They are no longer enemies, but messengers guiding you toward reliance on Him. And as you internalize these verses, you start to notice a shift. Your heart becomes lighter, your anxieties begin to settle, and your soul discovers a quiet confidence that surpasses understanding. You no longer demand immediate answers. Instead, you learn to listen for signs, to feel the subtle nudges of guidance, to recognize that every hardship is a conversation between your heart and Allah. This surah teaches you that trust is active, not passive. It requires doing, moving forward, stepping into the unknown, even when you cannot see the outcome. It is the choice to pray when the world seems silent, to hope when disappointment knocks, to believe when despair whispers. It reshapes your perspective. You start to understand that control is an illusion and surrender is the true power. You begin to see that when you trust, you are not losing strength. You are gaining clarity, resilience, and peace. You start to release the fear of what could go wrong and instead embrace the certainty of Allah's love, His mercy, and His perfect wisdom. Through this surah, you learn that trust is more than reliance. It is intimacy. It is the quiet knowing that Allah is near, that He watches over you, that nothing escapes His knowledge, that every tear, every sigh, every hope is seen and valued. And in that intimacy, your fears no longer dominate you, your doubts no longer paralyze you. You discover that the darkness was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to deepen your trust. And slowly, your heart begins to beat in rhythm with faith instead of fear. You begin to walk through life not with hesitation, but with conviction, not with anxiety, but with assurance, this surah teaches you that trust is not the absence of challenges, it is the presence of divine companionship through them. It shows you that the unknown is not empty, it is full of Allah's plan for your growth, your blessing, your guidance, and as you live within this understanding, a profound peace settles over your soul, the kind that does not depend on circumstances, the kind that does not waver with trials, the kind that anchors your spirit firmly in Allah's love and wisdom. It changes your relationship with pain, transforming it into a doorway to deeper connection with your Creator. Pain is universal. It does not discriminate. It comes to the believer and the doubter alike. It arrives in the form of loss, disappointment, betrayal, illness, loneliness, or unmet desires. And yet, this surah teaches you that pain is not merely a burden to endure. It is a message to decode, a teacher to listen to, a guide leading you towards spiritual intimacy. It shows you that every ache, every sorrow, every moment that seems unbearable is layered with purpose, carefully placed by Allah to awaken something within you that comfort never could. The surah calls you to see pain not as punishment but as purification, a process through which your heart is refined, your sincerity tested, and your reliance on Allah strengthened. You begin to understand that it is often in the moments when you feel most broken that you are closest to Allah. Pain strips away the distractions of the world, the false securities, the illusions of control, and forces you to face what truly matters, your soul, your Creator, and the depth of your faith. It reminds you that nothing is wasted, no tear falls without notice, no sigh is unheard, no struggle is forgotten. Allah sees the heaviness in your chest, the sleepless nights, the whispered prayers when the world is asleep, and in those moments He draws you nearer. This surah teaches you to embrace your pain, to feel it fully, and to surrender it completely, because surrender is not weakness. It is acknowledgement that Allah is the source of every comfort, every relief, every healing. Pain becomes a teacher, guiding you to patience when you want to rush, to gratitude when you want to complain, to trust when you want to despair. It transforms your perspective. Instead of asking, why me? You begin to ask, what is this teaching me? Instead of running from your suffering, you start to lean into it, knowing that leaning into Allah's mercy will bring healing that no worldly solution could provide. And as you internalize this teaching, something remarkable happens. The same pain that once crushed you now deepens your connection with Allah. You pray with greater sincerity, you reflect with greater humility, and you love with greater compassion. This surah shows you that pain is not the opposite of blessing. It is often its prelude. The trials you face cultivate resilience, empathy, and spiritual depth. They awaken the heart to realities it would have ignored in ease, and they teach the soul to rely not on fleeting comfort, but on eternal guidance. You begin to see that even in your lowest moments, Allah is weaving a path for you, a path that leads to growth, wisdom, and closeness to Him. The surah teaches that healing is not always about removing the pain, but about transforming your relationship to it, seeing it as an opportunity, a sign, a reminder that Allah is attentive, merciful, and intimately involved in your life. And slowly, your heart begins to change. You no longer fear suffering. Because you understand that Allah's presence is greater than every difficulty, you no longer measure your life by comfort, because you measure it by connection. You no longer despair when pain comes, because you see it as a sacred invitation, an invitation to draw closer to Allah, to surrender more fully, to trust more deeply. Your perspective shifts, your soul becomes resilient, your faith grows unshakable, and through this surah, you learn that pain is not a curse, but a conduit, a divine channel through which your heart learns the depth of Allah's mercy, the nearness of His presence, and the boundless expanse of His love. You realize that the trials you endure are not meant to destroy you, they are meant to transform you. And in that transformation, you discover a life richer, deeper, and more spiritually connected than you ever imagined possible.